Hi, welcome to the Retro Dream Studio. Okay, so today we'll talk about this little guy here, the MSX Yashica YC-64. For the first episode of the Light Review series, I have chosen to showcase my very first home computer that I got 40 years ago in 1985, when I was 10. So let me introduce this little guy, the Yashica YC-64. This is a typical Japanese machine made for the MSX standard. It's not a beast, but it's sturdy and reliable. Everything in it speaks of quality manufacturing. Also, it's a beautiful red color. And since this was my first computer, I have special feelings for it. Let me share with you some of its magic. In the early 1980s, Japan stood at the crossroads of a home computer revolution. The MSX standard, proposed by Microsoft Japan and ASCII Corporation, promised a much-needed order in a landscape fragmented by incompatible architectures. Many manufacturers joined this ambitious project: Sony, Panasonic, Sanyo, Toshiba. But one name surprised nearly everyone: Yashica, the legendary camera maker whose lenses had captured decades of Japanese pictures with their precision optics. Beneath the familiar red and white logo of a renowned camera manufacturer sat a compact computer with rounded edges, a surprisingly sturdy frame, and a keyboard that clicked with a photographer's sense of mechanical assurance. This was the Yashica YC-64, a computer designed as carefully as a camera, but destined to stay in the shadow of flashier MSX rivals. For most families, the Yashica was a rather quiet arrival. It didn't try to dominate with neon plastic or extravagant advertisements. It simply offered reliability, quality, and subtle elegance. Its designers at Kyocera had tried to build a machine with the same philosophy that guided their cameras. Make it simple, make it solid, make it work for years. The YC-64 was a solid piece of engineering. Though lacking some of the bells and whistles of more expensive models, it offered all essential functionalities of the MSX standard, making it a reliable workstation for programming, productivity software, early gaming, and simple graphics. Let's have a look at the input-output ports the Yashica offers. These are pretty much standard, as you can see. They are labeled in French since this was the export version. First, obviously, the power plug. Then comes the printer port. This is the one for cassette tape. Then you have the audio output, and finally the RGB output. The power switch is on the right side, and you have two DB9 joystick ports on the left. The tape interface was widely used for loading programs, games, and saving one's own creations. We children back then often waited patiently as our favorite space shooter screeched its way from tape into memory. Nice. The RGB or composite output ensured that pictures looked crisp on both consumer TVs and RGB displays, which was an advantage over systems with only RF output. This modest-looking machine was powered by a very capable Zilog Z80A running at 3.58 MHz, the same processor that powered many legendary 8-bit systems of the era. While not the fastest chip on the market, it had the advantage of being incredibly well understood by programmers. Countless books, magazines, and listings taught students and hobbyists how to bend the Z80 to their will. With 64 kilobytes of RAM, the YC-64 offered the standard amount for MSX1 computers. For the era, this was generous enough to create respectable games, educational programs, and home productivity tools. It required discipline, of course. A budding programmer had to think carefully, line by line, about how much space a bitmap or string might occupy. But this discipline was part of the charm. The 16 kilobytes of video RAM, dedicated entirely to the graphics subsystem, may sound small by modern standards, yet it was surprisingly effective thanks to the machine's video chip. The Yashica used the venerable Texas Instruments TMS9918A, a chip that defined an entire generation of 8-bit visuals. Its 16 colors were chosen from a bright, clearly defined palette, strikingly different from the warm but somewhat muddy tones of the Commodore 64. These colors popped with clarity on a CRT screen, giving MSX games their characteristic sharp and toy-like feeling. This palette, although limited, was largely sufficient to create visually interesting games. Developers learned to work magic with it. The TMS chip also supported hardware sprites, which meant that moving objects could glide across the screen without the programmer having to redraw them manually. Though its sprite limitations, such as the well-known horizontal overlap rule, demanded creativity, these very constraints gave MSX titles their unmistakable look. And then there was Screen 2, the famous tile-based graphic mode that became the playground of thousands of MSX BASIC enthusiasts. It allowed custom patterns, colorful backgrounds, and simple animations. Audio came as a courtesy of the Yamaha AY-38910, a 3-channel programmable sound generator. This chip, used in everything from arcade machines to home computers, gave the YC-64 a warm, chiptune-flavored voice that especially suited those Konami games that made most of its library. With just 3 channels, composers had to choose carefully. 1 channel for melody, 1 for bass, 1 for percussion, simulated through clever noise patterns. Yet the result could be surprisingly rich. Many MSX games turned these limitations into charming, iconic soundtracks that still resonate with retro enthusiasts today. The Yashica had only 1 cartridge slot. Some MSX competitors included 2, enabling simultaneous use of a game and an expansion, like a music module. But for many home users, a single slot was perfectly adequate. As compared to friends who had either a computer or a console, our MSX had the advantages of both worlds. Although it was a full-scale home computer with characteristics comparable to its competitors, it benefited from a large diffusion of cartridge games, just like was the case for consoles. These allowed instant loading and format reliability. Since MSX systems generally did not have built-in disk drives, games were published mainly on cartridges and cassette tapes. If there is one thing collectors still praise today, it is the Yashica's remarkable build quality. Yashica and Kyocera didn't cut corners. The casing was sturdy, the keyboard reliable, and even after decades, many units still boot with the same quiet confidence they had in 1984. I have many other MSX machines ready for a showcase if you like this format. Tell me in the comments about what you'd like to focus on and about your own experience with these fabulous machines. Of course, we'll not cover MSX only, but pretty much every interesting machine that has its share in the culture of the 80s. You can watch my retro computer timeline to give you an idea. Link in description. I hope you enjoyed this light review and that it brought up memories for MSX owners or made you curious to dig deeper into these fascinating machines. Don't forget to subscribe and see you soon for another retro dream.